Thanks so much. Welcome back. I hope everybody had a good meal. The hotel did a good job. Very much appreciate it. In this session, I'm going to let each of the participants introduce themselves and give their background stories while they, and I'm going to do that right through, like right now. It's a little bit different than what we did. We'll just go from my right to your left and let each of these fine people give their introductions. Thanks so much, Will.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Willard Anton III. I am the Senior Manager for Permitting Approvals for Resolution Copper. I previously worked for the Gila River Indian community for 18 and a half years in their environmental programs. A lot of compliance enforcement, and the majority of that was spent in air quality. Really, when you're involved in tribal government, and I'm also from the Gila River Indian community too, but you wear a lot of many hats, and a regular technician led me to the director over time. So we dealt with a lot of policy, a lot of government to government consultation. We've developed our own regulations with EPA. We've got treatment of the state from air quality to the Clean Water Act. So a majority of that was spent because the tribe had specific issues with industrial facilities. And so at the time when I had began, it was about anywhere from like 75 to 100 facilities at the time. As 2 industrial parks closed, it went to 1 main industrial facility that is near the Phoenix metropolitan area. And so a lot of that was geared to protect the tribe from a lot of environmental hazards that were a number of facilities during that time. So that's really where my background comes into play. And thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Thanks, Will.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maricela Solis de Kester, and I am the manager for BHP's US and Canada legacy assets and also our non-operating joint ventures. I joined BHP about a year and a half ago. I have a background in policy and also most recently came from the aerospace community. So I'm learning the industry and have had a really good time meeting the community of mining in not only in Arizona, but across our US and Canadian assets. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Leroy Samaidua. I am the Tribal Monitor Group Manager for Westland Resources. I've been working for Westland now for about 4 years. We started a Tribal Monitor program with them, worked my way up, and now I'm director kind of for the program itself. My background, I'm from the village of Munkapi, which is up in northern Arizona, a member of the Hopi tribe. My background is truly actually is in gaming. I worked in tribal gaming for almost 14 years, but with that also I went back and got my degree in biology, biomedical, and I've been able to work for my tribe as a wildlife technician, but then also get into this job working with Westland and starting the Tribal Monitor program. So I am very happy to be here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bernadette Cara. I am the field director for the Tribal Monitor program associated with Westland Resources. I, as too, have been with Westland Resources for 4 years. Leroy and I were one of many tribal representatives that took on this Tribal Monitor training, and we're all certified as para-archaeologists in this field. And I am originally from the Auction Indian community, which is one of 4 southern tribes that are associated with the Gila River Indian community, Salt River Indian community, and the Thanaatam Nation down south. My background is more of, I was in the medical field, and then due to health issues, I could no longer do that. So I went into working for my community and taking care of the community assets there. And then I moved on to the Culture Resource Department, where I was their culture resource land management specialist, which means that I handled their Section 106 consultation process. So since then, like I said, I've joined the program, and I am learning a lot about the mining industries, and I thank you for the invitation to be a part of this.
Thank you, Bernie, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Avi Buckles. I'm the Director of Cultural Resources here at Westland. Been doing archaeology for about 20 years. And if you guys would believe it, one of the things that I got into early on was mining history. And I used to work for the AML. I used to be contracted to the AML department over there in New Mexico. Mining patrimony was something that I was always very interested in. You know, the state of Arizona, the name came from a mine after all. So really, I did a lot of that. And then 4 years ago, I was asked to help, develop the Tonto National Forest Travel Monitor Program. And really, for the last 4 years, been working with these great folks. You know, Resolution Copper funded a lot of that program. And it's, really opened my eyes to be able to say, not just look at the mining history, but really to look at, how mining history affects tribal communities to this day, and how, moving forward with mining affects tribal communities. And really, one thing I've always found out is that there are connections. Who are the original prospectors? Who are the original people that were quarrying material here in this great state in the Southwest? It was Native Americans. So, they're the original keepers of the land. And really, this idea behind this program is to really to continue that engagement and make sure that we get tribal input the whole time. So thank you guys for having me here today.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, let's kick this off. So again, just a little bit, and we're talking about, right, incorporating Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge into the data collection and improve consultation and coordination with tribes. And so that's quite a bit. Quite a task. And so obviously a little bit of history on how we go into that and why is that important, right? We kind of ask ourselves, why is that important? It's important because tribes are dependent nations within the United States. That's how they're viewed, right? And they have a certain inherent sovereignty that belongs to them, that's not only in law and is recognized by law and is highly regarded, and there's specific things that we have to think about, and we have to understand that tribes are dependent nations that require a government to government consultation. And so for a company, and mining companies, typically we have federal laws that require us to do some type of engagement wherever there's a federal nexus, right? And so that could be the NEPA process, that could be wherever lands come into play, where BLM might have a say, like the Forest Service may have a say, but they're required to follow these laws that are in place. And so historically, right, if you don't know, tribes have always hardly been included the proper way. And so throughout history, we're starting to see, well, throughout history, that's what's occurred. But as we're starting to move forward, you're starting to see a lot more support. And it's been kind of always occurring. Tribes have always been requesting that they be at the table when certain things are occurring that could impact them. And now, more recently, we saw President Biden release his executive order. And part of that executive order, it did really talk about consultation, and it talked about traditional ecological knowledge. And so when we think about that, and I'm not too sure how many people pay attention to that, but when it starts to get to that level, tribes have always advocated for that. And it's because typically tribes aren't involved from the beginning. And at the same time, when that doesn't occur, tribes are then typically involved at the end process or when certain decisions have been made. And a couple of things for the tribe, that isn't the best place to be. And however, because of their inherent sovereign authority, it can be an issue for companies, because if certain things are not identified and taken into account, it can hold up a project. And so the last thing, as we all know, when we have a business, is a schedule, right? We want to keep the schedule. We want to get to a certain place where we're operating. And that can really, if we don't pay attention to those areas, it can put us in a bind. And so that's why it's really important, right? So I'm trying to just make sure that we understand that the framework and what the importance is of it. On the other end of it, depending on how your company moves forward, you could be doing a disservice and violating some of the things that you actually are foundational to your company values, right? When we start talking about human rights and certain things, did you truly incorporate the tribe at a certain point and find avoidance or mitigation for things that are important to them? And if we haven't done that, then we're not being true to our company values, or at least not getting, checking off that box to making sure that we're doing that. And checking off a box is sometimes how we look at it. In reality, it's a lot more than that. It's a lot of effort, a lot of resources, a lot of understanding, a lot of engagement. And so, how do we continue to build that? This really talks about more or less resolution copper and our engagement. So USDA has assigned the Forest Service to do the environmental impact statement that's linked to our land exchange. And in order for that to happen, we have to get a record of decision or a final EIS published, which includes heavy consultation with all our stakeholders. And for our particular project, where we're located, which is within a mining towns, and where mining has been there for decades within that area, it's fairly easy to gain support for those mining towns. Although, our historically, we have to understand what people think of mining and understand how certain regulations have changed since then. And so as we come forward and as we move forward, people expect us to play and operate in a better sense that's been done before. And so we've been able to gain that support with the local communities that surround our project. But at the same time, now we actually have to work with the Forest Service, who is doing the formal government to government consultation. And we played a supportive role in ensuring that the resources are required there or that are needed are in place for this to be done properly. And so a lot of that has been, engaging with the tribes and listening to the tribes. And one of the areas where we've come into play, where we're leading to, is as we're moving forward and we're looking at areas of lands that could be impacted, and we start talking about, one of the main areas that we looked at was the Emery Oak, and how that impacted the Western Apache and how important that was for them for many different reasons. And so the Forest Service and Resolution got together and talked about how can we ensure that, when we are looking at these impacts, how can we ensure that tribes their voices are being heard, and how do we try to start thinking about ways where we can enhance other areas or whatnot. And so through this, one of the first projects was the Emery Oak, where we brought tribal monitors around, and they began to really provide assistance to the work that archaeologists were doing when they were in the field and identifying and helping enhance that report. Because typically what was occurring is that as you move forward, and Avi, good person, he's an archaeologist at hand, but he will walk past most things and not be able to find things. And so that's why we have someone like Leroy and Bernie there to make sure that he understands that the things that he walked past are actually things that are important to tribal communities. And so and I had a hard time really in my previous work, working with EPA to ensure that they understood, because I worked in the environment, right? So a lot of assistance that we got was grant funded. And when we talked about how tying in some of our cultural activities, they would always say no. And we spent a lot of time going back and forth about how this is all intertwined to tribal communities. And you talk about vegetation, you talk about ceremony, you talk about traditional arts that we tribal communities do, and what they utilize and how important that means to them. It finally took probably about a year ago for EPA to really allow and create a policy for tribes to incorporate cultural activities into some of their grants. And it was a huge step. And so people are starting to understand and recognize that, the importance of the little things and how that's important to tribes. And I'll also like to say that, the word that we use is traditional ecological knowledge, right? And tribes have been advocating that for years. And it's important to understand, though, that although tribes have been advocating for it, tribes have also been advocating that it be respected in a certain manner and protected. So as we move forward with our project and what's been done as part of the consultation with the information we've collected by incorporating the tribal communities, we've also had to put in place many of systems and provide restricted access to that information and who is provided to. Tribes can always request information and that's privy to them. However, internally as a business, we put strict controls in place on who has access to that, because it's important. It's something that you can't just loosely put out there. And I think some of these areas, right, we got to make sure that we're really being mindful in all assets. So you got to really understand how our community thinks. And it could take many points of context to understand that. A lot of tribes have tribal preservation offices that are leads for some of the cultural areas. Tribes have cultural committees, cultural elders who aren't necessarily part of the government process, who just who culturally lead certain things within the community. How do you gain access to that? And that takes some thinking, because you have to really identify and involve people who are genuine and who understand a lot of these principles moving forward. Because if you move forward and you don't value and treat those principles at the bottom of what you're doing, you lose trust. And so it's really important as you move forward to make sure that you're being guided the right way, and that you incorporate somewhat of people who understand, who've done the business and worked with tribes previously. And you really have to do your homework on that. There's a lot of people that are work on behalf of tribes that, they may be good for certain portions, but really it takes this team. I have a lot of, I know my community, Leroy's from Hopi. So if I go up to Hopi, I have to rely on Leroy, and I have to really establish my relationships very slowly. And I have to kind of understand my role until I know I've established that relationship. And so it takes a team, right? It's not just one person. And so finding ways and avenues to ensure that you can move forward properly. But I'm sorry, I typically don't stick to my slides. I kind of just talk. But here's just, again, what are we doing here, and how is the project? We have 11 different tribes that we consult with, and each of those tribes we've offered to invite to our properties to see what our cultural surveys that we've identified, and allow them to tell us what their ancestral ties to the area. And then again, protect those things in a manner that is whatever's told to us. And so I've been, as I've come on, looking at some of these things and the interaction, the Tribal Monitor program has really made that easy for me to do my job, because they come in, they're not political, they're not trying to ensure that they're swaying everybody one way or another, but what they do is they help just tell their story, and then they listen and they talk about what that land was to their people, and then they offer that to listen and how it means to another tribe, because it all varies. Is I think Leroy said at one time, the best that I've heard, it's like a layered birthday cake, and all those tribes have been there at one point or another, and all of them respectively deserve to be acknowledged for that, because it's been utilized, that land's been utilized specifically for them in some way or fashion. And so our job is to make sure we take all of this and figure out as a business how to put in some best practices and move forward, right? Because that's what we want to do. I think that's the right thing to do. That's the direction that we have to go, especially with a lot of things aligning up, especially coming down from the federal government and the executive orders. So really, just thank you for allowing me to be here. There's, I don't know if you're going to get you'll get some of the slides here so you can look through that. If you ever have any questions, feel free just to shoot me an email, give me a call.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Maricela Solis de Castro, and I'm with BHP. And BHP has non-operating assets in the U.S. That we were never the operators of. So we have assets in California, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona. And so I just want to share a small example of how we have been able to partner with Westland Resources and the Tribal Monitor Program to really help us and influence our operation, taking into account some of the key areas of interest and importance for our tribes here in Arizona. So I'll cover a specific project we call Solitude. I'll talk about our site tours and the treatment plan recommendations that came as a result of those consultations. So Solitude is a facility that is located in the Globe, Miami area. That facility was owned and operated from like the 1960s roughly. And as a result of some studies around tailings, it's become a key priority for BHP to do some remediation work at Solitude. What this map is showing you is that Solitude is behind the community, and below Solitude is the hospital and some neighborhoods. And so it's become a very high priority for BHP to remediate and ensure that we've got some technical options that will make it a safe tailings facility. And so what we were proposing to build a buttress to secure those tailings that have been there for decades. And when we started this project, one of the things that became obvious is that we needed to engage with our tribal monitors to start our consultation process. Now, in the state of Arizona, this is all private property, and so we are under no obligation to conduct any consultation. However, BHP has an Indigenous peoples policy and is very committed to working with our host communities to ensure that we take their perspectives into account, and if appropriate, and it fits into our technical solutions, then those consultations actually influence the way that we operate. And so I'm very proud to say that through our consultation process, not only did our team have an opportunity to participate and learn from the Tribal Monitor Program, but also it influenced the way in which we were thinking about this buttress and how we were going to build it. So the site tour started in 2021, and the idea was that we were going to avoid any areas that had cultural heritage that had been located on our property. And so we knew that we had cultural heritage sites on our property, but we needed to come up with a solution. And so one of the solutions that the Tribal Monitor Program helped us identify is something simple like putting up a sign. And then the sign is a notice that you cannot proceed without prior approval, internal approvals. And so it really changed the way that we operate. And I'm really proud to say that our team embraced all of the recommendations from the tribal monitors, and it really is helping us to preserve some of these key cultural heritage sites that have been identified. Now, we did also find that in the process of the technical solution, we found that some of the sites are going to be impacted. And so you'll see those in the orange circles up here. Those are the cultural heritage sites that have been identified, and we knew that those were areas that were going to be impacted. And so one of the things that we worked on with the Tribal Monitor program is to help us come up with a treatment plan. It was really inspiring and truly educational to learn from the tribes, each of the perspectives, and their willingness and openness about the significance of each of these sites, and also help us co-create this treatment plan, because they knew and they know that it's for the greater good of the community. It's to secure the community that is downstream from these tailings. And so they actually helped us build the treatment plan, and we've come to an agreement with them through the consultation process. So it's been very, very powerful for our team to be able to build this treatment plan together and to come up with a remediation. So the solution was to do a full data recovery. And so we worked again with Westland and the tribal monitors to do that. We're continuing to, we continue to involve the tribal monitors during excavation and the remediation process. And then we learned about the section 106 of the federal government process. Even though we're not subject to it because we are on private property, BHP is committed to ensuring that we follow best practice. And so we followed section 106 as a result of their suggestion. And so it's worked really well. We also built in we also built in training for all of our teams and contractors who come onto our site. So in addition to doing our safety briefings and safety training, we also discuss the issue of cultural heritage sites on our properties and the fact that we have procedures in place to ensure that no cultural heritage area is inadvertently damaged or destroyed. So that's been a really key finding for us in a really powerful way that we can continue to partner with the tribes of Arizona, and the Tribal Monitor program helped us create all of that. So as I mentioned, we came up with the treatment plan, and we were mindful of the fact that we have to have a treatment plan that is taking into account the technical need to solve this problem, but also what does it mean for us to implement, and can we sustain, right? Can we follow through on this commitment? And so it was very robust discussions with our tribal monitors and our TIPOs in having these solutions brought forward. And I would say that was probably, for me, the most rewarding professionally, because we were able to come to an agreement and we were able to get endorsement from the TIPOs on our treatment plan that they helped us co-create. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Is everybody still awake out there? I know we had a big lunch and we all ate really good. I know I did, so I'm not sure if we have people awake still, but we're glad to be here as Westland, here for the AML. So I'm learning everybody loves acronyms and I still don't know all of them. So I have to write things down, like even AML, I was calling it FMLA. I know that's wrong, but so, working with this program, what we're doing, it's been, the way I say it is the idea of Native Americans recording their own history. What a concept. It's something that they're calling new, and it hasn't been new. We've been doing this our whole time we've been here. How else do we know what's happening or what's out here? But this project that we're doing with the tribal monitors, this is just going to kind of give you an overview of what we do as our job out there. So Tohono National Forest Tribal Monitor Program was established in early 2018 to increase tribal participation in cultural resource baseline studies for the proposed Resolution copper mine in Superior, Arizona. We've already discussed all this with Will. He talked about, the 11 different tribes that have affiliation with the area. So you think of tribes, like he said, we're looking at as a birthday cake, right? So we're looking at different layers on it. When you think about these tribes, they didn't stay in one location. When you look at their current reservation, we'll have a slide later, you're going to see a lot of these reservations are away from the project area. And that's just indicative of how life has happened. As people have moved on, as people have migrated, they've settled in certain areas. And then along with the reservations came in, they've been displaced some people off of this area. And so we have 11 tribes that are consulting with this area with resolution. So we were able to allow the tribal historic preservation officers of all of these tribes to recommend people to come to this program. That was me. Stuart Goyamti was a Hopi tribe, Tipo, and he said, hey, there's this training. Do you want to go do it? And I said, sure, why not? You know, something new, let's go try it. And so this was given out to everybody. We had Gila River, White Mountain Apache, Yavapai Apache Nation, Hopi tribe, Pueblo of Zuni, Akchin Indian community, and Mescalero. They've sent 30 members to do all these trainings. We've had 3 different trainings for it. And of that right now, we have, I believe, 18 members right now who are employed, and of 8 tribes of those 11. And so what we're calling it is we're the eyes and ears for the elders out there. Our job as tribal monitors is data collectors. We're out there to record history. We're out there to see what's out there and then to report back to our tribes. The tribes are then able to see through our eyes, through our ears, through our recordings, what's out there. And we're able to then also not only put this across to them, but we're able to bring them out there. And that's part of the whole process for it. So all it is providing a Native perspective during cultural and natural resource studies and increased tribal participation in the management of our shared history, land, and its resources. Here's the picture of all the reservations for the lands that are for who's consulting on this area. Like we said, you can see the blue area down there is what we're talking about. And you look at the nearby tribes, San Carlos, White Mountain, Gila River, Yavapai Nation. But you also see Hopi, Zuni, Mescalero, and you see how far away they are. Same with Anatam. You know, we have footprints within that area. And so the tribes want to be consulted on this. They want their voices heard also. And not just one voice who's closest, who's the loudest, but everybody. And so we were able to give perspectives from each tribe and not just, you know, within distance. Pictures of us. We've been able to work with archaeologists, biologists. We get the tribal monitors out there working on different studies. So a lot of baseline stuff is what we're doing. I was approached one time where they said, well, it's kind of unique that you, being Native American, have a degree in biology. Like, that's really unheard of. And you know, that's so amazing. And I go, well, my grandmother knew all the same things I do. She knew what the plants were. She knew their names. She knew their uses. She knew where they grew, what temperate zone. She just didn't know the Linnaean classification system. So I don't know why that doesn't make her a scientist also. You know, it's such a concept, and you think about it in that way, you go, totally true. And that's what we're talking about, this traditional ecological knowledge. You keep hearing this being thrown out. And now within, you know, the Biden administration, the indigenous traditional ecological knowledge. Everybody has it. It's not anything new. Everybody's heard stories from their grandparents about where they came from, who they are, what language they spoke. You know, maybe they spoke the language to you, but all of us have this. And the only thing that is different is we've never had a written system for this. So it's always been oral. It's been passed down through generation. And a lot of this has been since we were kids, you know, walking with my grandmother, going to pick cans, because back in the day, you used to be able to get lots of money for cans. But now you don't get anything. But yeah, you know, you go out and we'd be walking, picking cans, and she goes, there's this plant right here. It only grows from this time to this time. We use it for this and this, and this is the Hopi name for it. And as a kid, you're like, oh, yeah. And now as an adult, I'm like, do I actually remember all this stuff they told me? You know, why didn't we write this down? That's what this program's doing for us now, is we're able to write down this information and using our own knowledge as tribal members for areas that we're using, you know, that's going to be impacted. Again, Resolution Project, they're the ones who funded this for the development of it. And as we've gone along, we've gone expansion into private lands now. We've been working with people like BHP, who has allowed us to go on their land also. And that's the biggest thing I'm hearing from the tribes is we've been cut out of this land for, you know, however long the mine has been open. Again, you heard my comments earlier, they were not consulted on this. Whether it be they just didn't know whose land it was to begin with, or they just didn't care. And so them being able to get back onto this land where they do have stories, where they do have things that still, as we say, live out there. They live within these areas. They're just happy to be gaining access again. And so when we have these 20 tribal consultants that we have on our staff, we're able to get the tribes out there and get their viewpoints on what we're doing. But we've been able to get, because of this program, I look at it as a stepping stone. You know, it's not an end all be all for these people. I want them, as we're always talking about, we need representation. In order for anything to change within industries, we need the people in there who can make the decisions also. So as I look into mining, I look at my tribal monitors. They're like my kids now. I look at them and I tell them, you know, maybe you're good at archaeology. Why don't you go get a degree in that? You're a great biologist. Maybe it's great if you can go use this program and move on with it, because I don't want you guys to be a tribal monitor forever. This is not your end job. You need to move on and then come back to the different tribes and work for them. You know, we have a whole, from the Navajo tribe, the mining AML division. You know, we need engineers in there. We need miners. We need all these people. So these other people, you know, by having this program, we're allowing other monitors to work in other jobs. And there's other companies that are actually doing that. And we're continuing our training and cultural resource and environmental consulting too. More stuff on ours. We're talking about eyes and ears of the tribe, assistance on burial, recovery, and repatriation. We've been pretty good at being able to do that now, working with the tribes on that. Work experience, archaeological data recovery, surveying, monitoring, site files, reporting. As you're seeing, there's a lot of things we've been doing out there. I can read them all, but I'm not going to go through them. But now we're slowly moving. You know, we have offices here in Arizona. We also have offices up in Nevada. We have offices in the Pacific Northwest. So trying to expand this concept of using tribal members to record their own history is what we're pretty much wanting to do on this. Just some more of our list of accomplishments with some lands that we've been able to do and how much acres we've done. It's been a good 4 years, definitely. Pictures of our groups out there. We have, like I said, different tribes working together, which in itself is a big deal. You know, having 11 different tribes is like having 11 different, you know, countries work together for a common good. And that's hard. That's really hard. And the hardest part for it, I think, was the idea that we're able to give a perspective. And we've had this knowledge that we have, and we're able to allow each tribe to have an equal voice in what they're doing. And so this concept that we're doing just hasn't been done. You know, it's been done in smaller quantities or in different aspects of it, but not as such a large project with different tribes.
And Leroy, if you mind coming just for a second here.
Yeah.
You know, all I've ever done is archaeology for my career. I started for my first archaeology job was in the year 2000. And just to give a little bit of concept, when I looked around, I was on some of these huge projects. I looked around the people that were out there doing the baseline studies, doing the excavation, doing the recovery, right, of history. And I looked around and there really were not very many Native peoples. And I remember thinking, being a young man and thinking, God, you know, it's kind of interesting. You know, I'm a hairy Jewish guy from Wisconsin, you know, I'm here, you know, doing this. So, you know, it at heart, and I think it's really important to remember the Tribal Monitor program was a request from the tribes. Okay. The tribes really said, hey, you know, I appreciate, you know, Avi, your work, other archaeologists' work, but we really want to have our own voices out there. And you know what I was told by an old elder from Yavapai, Mr. Randall, was that, you know, it's not all just about the pottery. It's not about the old dwellings we see. It's about the land. You know, it's about the plants, the animals, the water, the hills, how it all ties together. So I just really want to emphasize that this is something the tribes asked for. You know, it's something when you bring people in and they're able to see it and work with you, it's a lot easier. And that's what I mentioned earlier about starting early, right? There's obviously there's always going to be disagreements. Some tribes are not going to like certain projects. But if you show that respect and get people involved in the beginning, generally it's going to be an easier process everywhere. And if you have, tribal representatives looking for those other resources, the ones that I walk over, Bernie, that's what's important. At heart, really, in my opinion, my experience, that's what the tribes want, is just to be part of it, have their own voice, and to be an equal, player at the table.
And as you can see, over the past 4 years, it's turned out very well, because I'll be speaking in this term as we're family.
Harry Jew from Wisconsin, I guess now. Tribal.
We've baptized him, but we will not share his name.
Don't tell me either.
All right, Bernie, you want to talk about some of just our other work that we've been doing?
Yes, as Leroy has mentioned before, as well as Will, is we've been able to get our tribal monitors. We've been able to bring the tribal monitors into different aspects of archaeology. It's not just out there walking alongside archaeologists, which was in the beginning our very, very difficult task that we had, because we had archaeologists and natives sitting there saying, them looking at us saying, well, why do we need to have them there? And that's why, because people like Avi walk over things that, he has no idea what is there. So basically, it took us a while, but everybody is one big happy family now. We all work together and we look at things that we have to have that one other team member. It's not just pure native. We love it when we walk alongside archaeologists, and even still to this day, we are teaching them and they are teaching us. Unfortunately, we've had to make the archaeologists understand that in our native cultures, there's only so much information we can share. There is some information that non-natives are not elaborate to or know. And even for us as Native Americans, depending on whether you're male or female, you're not going to be able to know some information or be privy to that information. So what we've been able to do is integrate our tribal monitors into more archaeological work, which is using them for data recovery, which has been a big hit with tribes, only because we're using our own people to conduct these recovery sessions. And they like it better when they know that they have a tribal representative overseeing that work that's being done. So this has been a big bonus, for all of our monitors being able to go and take part in the different portions of this. Mr. Wells is a member of the Gila River Indian community, and they have 7 districts within that community, and he's from District 4. He is an awesome artist, and he's doing a lot. We're moving him into an illustration phase for our reports, to where he's actually hand drawing a lot of what we're finding out there and piecing it together. So, there's different, like Leroy said, we have tribes that members that are really good at plants and so forth. So they're into doing a lot of biology work. So basically, we've had a lot of data recovery that we've implemented with our tribal monitors in Baghdad, New Mexico, Marana, and just a lot of small projects that we do. They do a lot of monitoring of maybe mining drilling pads. We'll have a monitor on site watching what they're doing as they're conducting their work and so forth. So we've been able to utilize our tribal monitors in a lot of different job related experiences, and they're liking it. And they, it's just an overall view of how they've worked together, what they recover out in the fields. Our archaeologist has been able to teach them how to basically do data recovery. we, as Maricela and Will have mentioned, we have been able to produce for them cultural, cultural sensitivity training. And basically what we do is we've implemented notification for them, because unfortunately my role in a lot of the tribal monitors, the program itself has been that tribal representative. Unfortunately, like BHP has acquired land that they weren't the original mining company. But because they have to clean up this act, and they've asked us to come out and survey these areas and go back and revisit these cultural sites on their private lands, we've been able to discover that some of these sites have been impacted, without them at sometimes even knowing that they were. So basically what I've done is I've come in and assisted them in a role that I go and they come to me and they say, how do we tell the tribes that this happened? And the number one rule that I always tell them, because they're freaking out, like, oh, it's bad enough we have this bad relationship with them, they don't like mining. How am I gonna, what impact is this gonna have? I know this is gonna be a negative impact, and I've had to sit them down, calm them down, and basically telling them. And basically, inform them that, the best approach is just to be open and honest with them.
Yes.
Transparency and honesty is the best way to go. I can't say it and I can't stress it anymore. It has produced that transparency and honesty has produced a very genuine relationship between these private mining companies and the tribes. And it's very rewarding to know that Leroy and I and the rest of the tribal monitors all play a role in that. And that's what, as you see, that's that role that we have, is that being the eyes and the ears out there. And that's the important goal. So basically, like I said, we have really let these companies know that whenever we come up on something, or they come up on something, you have to, especially if it's unfortunately an inadvertent discovery, you have to stop the work. Don't touch anything. Don't destroy it any more than it already is. Give us the opportunity to send, our tribal traditional practitioners out there to take care of this area, and let us facilitate to help you better all understand why it's important to handle these situations in a delicate manner. Tribes, we've continued to educate private companies. Will was with us a short time ago at the end of last year. We were all hosted by the Hopi tribe. So what we got to do was go out there and be little kids and, be like tourists and visit sites that, we've never seen in our life. We've read in a book, but we've never seen. So just to be a part of it, and that's like what Will and I, we both share that. We're both from the O'odham culture, and they're very similar. The Hopis, as well as our culture, is very similar. But, it's just the overall of seeing their way of life compared to our way of life, and just overall respecting it. No matter which tribe you go to, no matter which landform you're on, it's respecting and trusting that you care about who they are, and that we all have a past. You all have ancestors that probably came from another part of the world, and that's just like myself. My grandfather was Spaniard, so it's just one of those things that we just never know where we come from, but wherever we do come from, we always have to treat people with respect. So basically our monitoring projects, oh my goodness, I've had the pleasure of being climbing some of these mountains. They have me now more. Leroy and I hardly ever see the great hills of Arizona anymore. But, we come out and we find all these rock shelters. Our tribal monitors are very are very good at finding these things. They have that knowledge of their past and the stories that they've been told. They know how to look at a landform and say, you know what, I think there's something there. So there they go, climbing up mountains and finding places like rock shelters that have never been discovered or recorded. So those are the props that, archaeology has had with this tribal monitoring program, and which is kind of made Avi look a little bit better for walking over things because,
I told her it's all gonna come back. I'm gonna do a survey over where she did and find something she missed.
and then like we're mentioning, we even go out in the biology work that we do, but there's times that, we come across abundance of our fruit that we make jams or pies and syrup and everything with on a yearly basis. We go out there, and if we're out in the field and they're ready to pick, we'll pick them, we'll eat them out there. It's just one of those things that we look for our resources out there that are still used today. Our center photo is a member of the Tohono Nation. His name is TJ Alvarez, and he came to the program as an employee of the Gila River Indian Community, EDQ. DEQ, yeah. He came from that area, and right here he's harvesting bear grass to take back to a relative in the Tohono Nation because they don't have a location to find it. So what we do is, if we have the opportunity to be out there and do some gathering for people and be able to take it back to our elders who are not, may not be mobile anymore, to be able to go out there and do this themselves, that's what we find and locate and document and everything out there.
And
And
the
it
other
also-
and the other picture over there is just to show that actually at one time I used to be in the field.
Yeah.
It's the real documentation that I used to be able to walk. I don't do that anymore.
And he knows how to balance well, because as you can see, it's very narrow.
So we're just gonna go, I think we're getting down to the end, so we'll just kind of go through this and see if there's anything, some of our just work, like we said, environmental monitoring, ESA, training opportunities, we've Section 106, NEPA, ARPA, all the different things that we use for our work, we get to go through, and they actually work with this on that. Again, just as you're hearing outcomes, we've been talking about the whole time, just opportunities that we're able to do this, able to get tribes involved, getting more participation. And, I think we're learning that the earlier we engage with people, the better it is. And that's just overall, I think, what needs to be said amongst this. Even during COVID, we still were full strung running, even with masks out there, but we were able to continue our work, which was great. And that's it. More pictures.
Just part of the panel, you're not doing a presentation?
No, that's good. I'm part of the panel.
Okay. Thanks, I didn't want to, and I apologize to you all for rushing you along. I could sit and listen all day because I'm learning so much from this. But I wanted to provide Q&A opportunity in the afternoon until 3 o'clock, so that from the crowd and also from each other, we can keep asking questions and driving the conversations a little deeper. Anybody have a question that they? Yeah, I could see that he was scratching his nose. He was raising his. Thank you.
Again, Hank Marshall with Clearflow Group. Thank you again for the fabulous program. To me, it's not a great thing. I think it's the right thing to do. And I'm curious about the genesis of it. Is this something that is organic here, or is this modeled after something that's been done somewhere else?
I think, when they first started it, they looked at other programs of, tribal monitoring is not new. California's been doing it, all the different tribes. Canada's really far along in a lot of the things they do. But I think the way we modeled it, as far as working alongside archaeologists and biologists and using our knowledge for it, is a little bit different. Because when you hear monitoring, that's what you think of, right? Them standing there, not doing anything, but just making sure you don't run over anything. That's what a lot of monitor programs are. And I think the genesis of it was maybe we started as just as walk-alongs, but then they realized that we do have this knowledge and we actually understand, like biologists all the time tell me that the tribal monitors are better at plant identification than they are. And I said, yeah, because we've been looking at it for the past 1,000 years. So of course we know what they look like. You know, we're just, it's from where we're from. So we are better at this and that. And I think, you know, that itself speaks highly that we have professionals telling us, you guys know what you're talking about. And that was our biggest hurdle. Like Bernie said, when we started, archaeologists didn't want to hear what we had to say. They were right. They went to school for this. I have degrees in this. I studied my PhD on this. And so I know everything about this. And we had an argument one time with our archaeologists because we found this artifact and it's a pipe. It's what it's used. We use them in our tribe. And he was like, no, it's not. No, it's not. He went, did his research, came back. Oh, you guys were right. And I think after that, once we showed, and not showing them wrong, it's just proving that, hey, we actually do know and have some information on who we are of our own people. So like I said, what a concept that we know about our own people. But when you're looking at it, I think it organically had to happen that way. There was no way that we could have just forced this into what we're doing now and expect it to be successful, especially with this many tribes.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, you know, there were a series of draft EIS comments from the tribes. You know, I really took those to heart, you know, Leroy and I and Bernie when we were first creating this. But for me, it was really about working together, right? You know, I got a smiley face here. I like to get along with people. I want us to work together collaboratively. Doesn't mean that we don't have disagreements sometime, but really tried to build the program to say, okay, everybody has an equal voice and is going to have a chance to say that.
Can I ask a question of the panel for every one of you to basically, and then we'll get to you. Like you indicated, the monitoring program was sort of, you know, kind of a watch and consult. Now it's much more active engagement so that you guys are guiding some of the early research and outcomes. How do we kind of get over the fear of engagement, right? As a mineral development person, the permitting process is a prescribed process and you try to follow it to the letter so that you don't get sued. But in doing so, it kind of constricts the engagement aspect of it. So how do you folks, every one of you on the panel, how do you see the tribal monitoring engagement actually enhancing the outcomes and helping mineral development professionals who've had to kind of suffer through the permitting process, and you guys have too, because you've been largely extracted out of it. So how do we kind of get over the fear and make sure that the engagement gets initiated and goes deep and long?
Well, I think what I took from your question and how, at least from my standpoint, right, with working on the tribal side, understanding, at least looking at my government and what we expect when we start dealing with consultation, had many experiences where we have state agencies coming in telling us that they have a timeline and that we're consulting and that we need to get things done by a certain time and that certain decisions need to be made. And I've always seen that that's not the right approach. Those people typically are not the leads for that particular area and they get sent right out. So how do we move that, right? And how has this program changed that? Well, the reason why this program works is that these are community members from different tribes who are able to come in and provide the information that we're collecting and share it and share their experience and how it relates to them. And what that shows is it puts trust in each of the tribes. I mean, Leroy could be doing guiding Salt River or Gila River through those and provide his perspective, and it creates that dialogue and trust there. And so that then falls back on the company that you're doing the right thing. So if you have programs like that where you're integrating using tribal members, you know, ensuring that you're using them in a way too, in a manner that, again, not there trying to persuade anything, but more of an education of what it is that you're doing, right? And when you come from that standpoint and where people don't feel like you're just putting tribal people in front of other tribal people to try to sell something, that becomes very apparent to tribes too. So you have to really understand, like in these areas, as you're building something, that you structure it in a way and you create those boundaries of what that's going to be, right? And I think when you do that and you strategize that properly, everybody sees that you're trying to do it in the best manner. And so, but engagement, right? Engagement is trying to figure out and having a good insight. And that takes really just an ability to lean into a tribe. And if you're coming from the cold front end, I would highly suggest that you just do a little bit of research. Look at, you got the internet, you have books out there, libraries where you can at least, you have, and a lot of the internet, they talk about what their initiatives are. So as you come to the table, you're not just all about business and what your project is. You're talking about things that are important to them where you can find alliances in what you're doing. So you really have to do your homework. And a lot of it comes just relationally understanding that, and then moving into what it is that you need to talk about, setting a nice, comfortable framework for it, and then moving forward, listening. A lot of it is listening from the tribe. When you're on this side of it and you're sitting in front of the tribe, you can steer it, but you got to make sure you listen and then follow up. And then to me, that's the best way to move forward with engagement, whether you have is the first time interacting with them or you have things that you can pull in. But again, it's also just, finding the right team where you just think of it as being at family at home, and how you look and you consider what it's a lot of it is touchy feely. And I have this conversation all the time, even with Avi. Bernie and Leroy and I exactly what we're talking about as I came in and did some initial engagements where we were hosting. And I'm like, Avi, we need to sit back, rethink. We need to make sure that we're taking into consideration a lot of X, Y, and Z. And he did that same face. And he understood, because a lot of the times when you're engaging with somebody the first time, and especially from a tribal perspective, it's a lot of observation. And we're observing and we're seeing how people are coming at us. We're trying to read those things. And something as little as maybe not staying on time and not sticking to your agenda, not doing a prayer or some little thing, those will throw people off. And you got to kind of understand and really just be really considerate in those manners, having water available, having bathroom breaks, especially if there's elders there. Those are you have to really start thinking about those sense of how you would think about your grandmother, grandfather. Hopefully you think good light of them and you treat them really respectful, but I always talk about that. That's how we got to think of these things. We're going to be bringing people out to visit the site. Avi's going all over the mountains. I'm like, Avi, everybody can't do like you do, Well, I'm giving him too much credit for what he can do.
For the compliment.
But those little things. So I think in short, just pay attention, dig in a little bit, and make sure that you're always trying to figure out how this is best benefiting both of everybody, and lean on those. And just, again, it really comes down to being personable.
I would say from our perspective, so BHP is obviously an international company, largest mining company in the world, and we have our Indigenous peoples policy, which basically helps us take a step back and think about our projects from a sort of human perspective, right? Because our mining projects are really generational projects. And what we've learned here in the US and all over the world, quite frankly, is that tribes typically think in terms of generations, right? So it's really helped us understand that we're not that misaligned. If we think about the life of mine, that it's going to impact generations, that's what they're thinking about, right? So when you talk about bringing people together, oftentimes we're having the exact same concerns, the same conversations need to happen. And we also not need to be afraid. We need to have a little vulnerability. Yes, I said the word vulnerability. Our industry has to be a little vulnerable and open up and be willing to learn and be willing to take in the information that they're willing to share with you. Just like if somebody came to your home, you would want to, open your doors and open your mind and your heart and let them know that what you're thinking about and what you care about, what are your priorities? It's the same sort of engagement, right? We also want to think about the fact that there's a government mandated process that's prescribed, and then there's sort of the private sector approach, right? And so for BHP in particular, these are private lands. We're not required to follow Section 106, but it was the right thing for us to do because as a global company, we have our Indigenous peoples policy, and it's something that is driven from our global headquarters. And so that starts when you think about your companies. I would suggest thinking about what is your position? What is your headquarters thinking about in terms of engagement with local communities, not just in the US, but around the world? Do you have a position on that? Have you thought about it? How do you operationalize that, right? And then you can, of course, step into the government realm of what is required from the permit side. The relationship between the tribes and the US government is not perfect, but it's also long and has a historical context to it that is outside of the private sector. So you also have to be mindful of the fact that you sometimes are the third wheel in that relationship as a company. And so how do you mitigate that and how do you balance that? Well, you got to give both space to work out the relationship, but it should not preclude you from moving forward with your own engagement. And as a company, what is your culture? What is your thought about engaging early on with Native American communities? Is that something that is of a priority? So you're thinking about your projects. Are you here for a month? Are you here for, a year? Are you here for 10 years? Are you here for 60 years? And so you got to start thinking in the same terms in terms of generational impact and generational opportunities is what I would suggest that you take into consideration as you're engaging or thinking about how do we engage. The Tribal Monitor program has helped us build incredible relationships and knowledge, not just for those of us that are here right this second, but we'll have other generations coming through our mining facilities. And so we want to impart their knowledge that they've shared with us to our future generation of miners. And so, we're starting to think more in terms of generational education and generational sensitivity around these issues. So that's something that BHP takes very serious. And I'm proud to say that because of their influence in our relationship that we have built with the tribes, we've changed the way that we operate locally, and we've been able to influence our organization as a whole. So, and we've been able to export some of their knowledge and framework and how we operate to our Canadian colleagues. So it just is a matter of mindset and being mindful of the fact that there's the permit government side of the thing, and there's a relationship there, but then there's the private sector side. And that's, I think, where you in your own role can have a real impact.
Leroy?
Yeah, I think what they talk about, what I've heard already so far, is a lot of it is homework. Just seeing whose land it is to start with. When you're looking at your properties, who should I be talking to? A lot of times that's unapparent. You have to look through it. That's where people like me and Bernadette come into play. We were able to help in those kind of processes, but the part of it is it will be uncomfortable because it's just going to be what it is. But to start, it's just basic introductions. Who's my company? This is what our plans are. This transparency that Bernie keeps talking about, that's how you need to start a conversation. And you need to start it early, at the beginning of when you're thinking about doing this. They should not be the afterthought, because when you get to that point, you're already too late. And you've already missed your opportunity to start this conversation. Because once you get them not on your side, because you're never going to be on your side, but once you get them on board with wanting to engage, you've got them. And then also when you're starting this, remember, this is just not a one-time thing. This is going to be continuous through the life of your project. And it has to be, because if not, they're going to zone out and say, we're done, And it's basic things like just as Will's talking about, etiquette, just being truthful in what you're wanting to do. Talk to them. And then my other suggestion I know is a lot of the times, and I've heard this from my grandfather, they say people want our knowledge. They want us to talk about things. They want something from us. Why do we have to go to them? They should be coming to us. They know where my reservation is. They know where my house is. How come they're not coming out here? So I give that challenge also, when you get the opportunity. We were able to take, like I said, resolution out to Hopi. That's a big deal. Hopi is a very close society. And for them to finally say, come out, come see where we live, what it does is it humanizes us as people, not as an entity, not as a nation. We're actually people. And you get to see where we live. You get to see why we fight the way we do for things, why we find things important. And you're going to realize it's the same exact reasons why you guys fight for your own family too. It's not that hard to do, but it is scary, definitely, for sure. And that's why I said a lot of times it's just do your homework and then have somebody who maybe knows of the tribe or have some in that just helps a lot also.
I guess for me, really, when Avi was talking about the tribal monitor program being developed, or even suggested, the suggestion came out of the tribal consultation. It was a roundtable with Native American tribes, the 11 tribes representatives for the Resolution Copper Oak Flat project. At that time, I was the land management, I was the cultural resource specialist. I was approached, how can we, by a Resolution Copper leadership, and they asked me, Bernie, how can I get to the tribes? And basically I looked at them and I just said, give them what they want, a seat at the table. Listen to them. When these private companies came in and they opened their doors to private lands for Native Americans that has been shut for hundreds and hundreds of years, they've never even had access to any of these places. They've known that they've had cultural resource sites there, but they've never been able to go in and actually see this. And because we instructed them to follow that Section 106 nexus, that has allowed them to bring tribes in, let these tribes see what's actually out there and have that seat at the table. When they talk about these projects and the introduction of what they're going to be doing, and the fact that they initiate it by saying, we want your input. And that allows, to start building that relationship. It's been a lengthy one at getting it where it is now with tribal engagement, with Resolution, BHP, and some of the other private mining companies that we've been able to assist in this engagement with. But overall, where it's at right now, because of the fact that they opened those doors and they let them in and they said, come talk to us. We want to hear you. That has produced a very positive relationship. And that relationship is like I said, rewarding for me because we've never been there. But it also gives the tribal representatives that same feeling to know that they were heard. They came to mutual decisions, though, their treatment plans that they put together was BHP working with what they heard from the tribes, from what they wanted. And because of that, it developed a plan that both were happy and the outcome was positive. But they also understand that dialogue needs to keep going. It's not going to stop. And that's one of the things that Leroy and I play a big role, and assisting Avi here in that, as well, is that we have to keep reminding everybody that, it can't stop here. We got to keep going. You open that door, keep welcoming them in, and just give them updates. I mean, it's not an update that you got to do every month, but at least as your project's moving forward, let them know where you're at. That way it gives them that sense of saying, you know what, okay, now we're going to move to another phase of their property. They're going to need our help again in this. So, it's encouraging for the communication between the private sector and the tribes. And as long as you have that open communication, but that communication has, like I say, has to be transparent, respectful, and honest. That's the only way that you're going to be able to keep them truly engaged, because those are the factors that, and as most of you know, because of the fact that those doors have been closed, they're not very trustworthy of mining, and they don't support mining. Me and Leroy, and I'm sure, Will, with the position that he has, we're kind of caught between the good and the bad, because no matter what our role is to help these private sectors through, or even the federal agencies through these tribal monitoring process, we still have to, we're still Native American, and we still know that we're not in support of mining either. But we're doing whatever we can to help you all build a relationship by engagement. We do no part of consultation. We're no politicians. We don't want that role. But we're just being open and honest by bringing people, our tribal representatives, to the table for private entities, and just guide you all in how to build that relationship and maintain it.
Avi, did you have anything to offer? And then I think Sarah had a
Yeah,
question.
just all I can say is, they're your neighbors. I think the question started off, about if people are kind of worried about engaging, and really, they're your neighbors. Do it. It's not going to harm anything. And you'd oftentimes be surprised when you come at it, all the approach that all the folks were saying here. Sometimes you'd be surprised at how people can come together and come to solutions.
Yep, great point. Do you remember your question?
I do, and I have a ton more. I'm just wondering, since the beginning of this particular tribal monitoring program, has there been other companies and other groups have come to this group and asked for examples of partnering or mentoring in their projects, or how they get started with their own program, and kind of what kind of engagement you've done with other groups, and where this work's being done, and other examples that you can share with us, because this is a good positive experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are working, all over Arizona with different types of projects. There's up and coming mines. We're working with developers. You'd really be surprised. It's really opened doors, to other projects for us too. I don't want to tell you all the names of all of them, because we're just starting some of them, but they're all big names, and really just to come in and help build relationships in a lot of ways. I mean, kind of that's how Will kind of started it off. It's building a relationship, and there's plenty of other mines that we've been involved in.
Yeah, if I could. So we've been talking about bringing sort of new projects forward. And all of this is really rich, because what I'm hearing is, in all of your passionate commitments and discussion, is that you just want a seat at the table to help guide better outcomes.
Yeah.
And that is really encouraging, because we want to see better outcomes, right? We're guided maybe by federal documents, or maybe our own inadequate background understandings. And so to fold all this in could create some really strong, better outcomes. On the AML front, how do you guys see the monitoring program, Leroy? How do you see that sort of folding in? Because we're stepping into past failures. Quite frankly, when we didn't have any environmental regs or any other regs to sort of guide us. So how do you envision the tribal monitoring program to step in and be a part of that piece? Because we've never had these discussions in all the AML summits that we've led. We've had tribal members in the region, but I think this tribal monitoring program is really kind of a recent thing. So Leroy, if you wanted to sort of take that one. Put you on the spot.
As earlier we were asked, where do we go from here? How do we move forward? How do we get these, we talked about this pilot program for the AML. How how do we get the next funding for it? And I think that's the perfect way to do it. Let's get the tribes involved. When you have the nations who have influence because they are their own sovereign nations, when you have a project and especially it works right and it works, we find that it actually does good, they'll be more apt to want to do more with that. And I think, and that'll give more influence for the rest of it because you can show, based on collaboration, we were able to produce this. And when you look at a lot of, I'm sure the list that you guys are going to make, there's going to be some that overlap within tribes, within tribal land, within traditional homeland. So the more people you have involved, I think the better you have a chance to get this moving on. We want this to be successful. And I think the tribal monitors themselves, they can definitely play a role in a lot of this. I think they would be able to help with this process in not only doing engagement, that's what we're talking about, but also in setting, I guess, a precedent on how we do things and what's the right way to do it. And not just because we have to do it because of the law, but like we're saying, because it's right, it's what should have been done. And it wasn't in the past, like you said, there's past failures for this.
Yeah, for sure.
We can remedy this. We totally can, but we need to do it as a group. We can't do it alone. And from our side as the tribes, we're not gonna, we can't do it ourselves. So we do need that outside help. And I think by partnering with these tribes, this will just make these projects that much better. And I think that's how that can be done.
I just want to not correct you, but make an adjustment in your thinking that it won't be us picking these projects. You guys have a seat at the table, right? Because we might pick if we move on this front of let's all get together and pick 10 projects in each of the states. So it's important, I'm going to come at it from like an engineer's perspective, right? Like we should go in and do this because it'll have the greatest improvement, but it may not have the highest value for tribal members in the region. So I would offer that you and all tribes have a seat at the table in those choices so that we redefine value, right, into and incorporate your value terms as well. And make them ours.
And maybe that's something as far as like within Indian land where we can talk about that and get leaders together to actually ask them. Because they're the ones who live out there and they know what project, everybody knows what has not been done on the lands. We know about the uranium tailings. We know about all these abandoned mines. Mm-hmm. You just have to ask them. And I think that's more of it is less of us picking it and it's more of the tribes themselves, allowing them to have a list of 10 to go, hey, what do you think, categorize where you think would be the best outcome for it. And they will be more than happy to, we have the organization here with us. They would be willing to more than not to be part of this process.
Are there any other questions from the group here? We're slated to take a break, get a coffee jolt, and then we're going to come back and actually talk about these sorts of things and talk about, I have everybody just throw ideas on the wall about what are our next steps? What are the next, what are the 10, there's several states mentioned here, begin that process of discussion and answer a bunch of other questions. So if there's any other questions from the crowd, or we can go get a coffee and then come in and finish strong. Hopefully have cookies or something else hideous out there. And come in and finish it strong. We have a series of questions, but obviously we're going to turn it to you all as well in the crowd here with maybe some of the burning questions that have risen from this AML discussion. So why don't we break and then come back at 3:20. Thanks so much.